Elon Musk announced that he would be suing the ADL for $22 billion. But who is the ADL? Well, if you ask Jonathan Greenblatt, the CEO of the ADL, he would say they're just a little nonprofit out of New York.
We're a nonprofit here in New York.
The ADL is anything but a powerless little nonprofit. The Anti-Defamation League, or the ADL, has stood as the guardian against bigotry and anti-Semitism for decades now. Yet the ADL's own history is riddled with question marks, and beneath its shield, an intricate web of controversies, pressure campaigns, and debates unfold. One of the most glaring controversies that the Anti-Defamation League has faced over the past decades is, ironically, defamation. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into the controversies of the ADL over the years and how we got to the spot we're in now, where everybody seems to be talking about the ADL. A huge thank you to my friends over at BizPack Review for making this video possible. Make sure you subscribe and follow BizPack Review here on X, on Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook, on YouTube, and make sure you hit the notification bell, especially on X, because you will stay up to date with the most current news in politics and culture by hitting that notification bell and following BizPack Review. Today, we are going to do a deep dive into the controversies surrounding the ADL. Former U.S. Congressman Pete McCloskey was one of the individuals who felt the sharp sting of the ADL's false allegations. Taking the ADL to court, McCloskey emerged with a settlement, and the ADL was forced to walk back their claims. The McCloskey lawsuit came after raids were made by the San Francisco Police Department and the FBI on offices of the ADL in both San Francisco and Los Angeles, which found that the ADL was engaged in extensive domestic spying operations on a vast number of individuals and institutions around the country. During the course of the inquiry in San Francisco, the SFPD and FBI determined that the ADL had computerized files on nearly 10,000 people across the country, and that more than 75% of the information had been illegally obtained from police, FBI files, and state driver's license databanks. Much of the stolen information had been provided by a fellow named Tom Girard of the San Francisco Police Department, who sold or gave the information to Ray Bullock, ADL's top undercover operative. The ADL agreed to pay from its annual multi-million-dollar budget. Keep that in mind, the ADL gets millions and millions of dollars, more money than most of us will ever see every year. They agreed to pay $50,000 to each of the additional plaintiffs in the McCloskey case. These three individuals continued to press charges against the ADL despite a continuing series of judicial roadblocks that forced 14 of the original defendants to withdraw. Another 2 died during the proceedings. But this wasn't the only time that the ADL's aggressive stance and broad brush tainted private citizens. The ADL has countless other examples outside the McCloskey case, leading to legal repercussions and more settlements for, again, ironically, defamation. These settlements and these defamation cases are raising legitimate concerns about the organization's discernment. But it's important to know the history of this organization so that we can understand that much of the skepticism now against the ADL is not unfounded. In 1993, the ADL settled a lawsuit with the Quigley family for $10.5 million. The family claimed that the ADL had invaded their privacy by obtaining confidential police files on them without consent. See? The ADL has a history of this, as we saw before with the San Francisco case. They obtained the confidential police files without their consent, and the family was smeared as anti-Semitic. The ADL has gone as far to state at a 1994 news conference on the issue that the Quigleys, this family, were guilty of perpetrating the worst anti-Semitic incident in the area since the slaying of Jewish talk show host Alan Berg 10 years earlier. Now, the Quigleys, this all started because of a dispute with their neighbor, and eventually the ADL jumped in and decided to compare this family, smear this family as anti-Semitic, and compare them to someone who murdered a Jewish talk show host. Obviously, they had to pay for that. They had to pay the $10.5 million. They had to pay out in the McCloskey case. But as we saw with the McCloskey case as well, it takes a long time to fight these cases. Most people don't have the resources to fight back against the smears from the ADL. The ADL in present day is currently smearing people as either anti-Semitic, anti-LGBTQ, because their scope has broadly expanded outside of their charter of fighting anti-Semitism. The ADL has even gone as far as smearing Chaya Rashik, an Orthodox Jewish woman who founded the account Libs of TikTok. They smear her as anti-LGBT and accuse her of stoking hostility against that community. All Libs of TikTok does is simply repost publicly available content that progressives themselves are already posting. There's no editing, there's hardly any commentary, but yet she's on the ADL's hit list. Elon Musk responded on the issue of Rashik in particular, saying that the ADL pressured him and X, formerly known as Twitter, to ban Rashik and accounts like her. Elon Musk stated, "ADL has pushed hard for us to shut down accounts like Chaya's, even though it has nothing to do with anti-Semitism, which is their supposed charter." But the ADL smear gun is an equal opportunity one. They'll smear anyone from private citizens to companies to entire countries. Back in 2018, the ADL and Jonathan Greenblatt sent a letter to Iceland regarding their proposed ban on male circumcision. You're really not going to believe what I'm about to tell you, but we have the receipts to prove it. In the letter they sent out, the ADL and Jonathan Greenblatt,
We're a nonprofit here in New York,
threatened to smear the entire country of Iceland as Nazis if they did not adhere to their demands. They claimed that this ban on male circumcision would be contrary to religious freedom. But if that was their main concern, religious freedom, why would they not kindly suggest that Iceland offer religious exemption for this ban? Not only did they demand that Iceland backtrack on the proposed ban entirely, but they stated, and I quote, "Given that 28% of Iceland's tourists came from North America in 2016, Iceland's standing in the US should be of great concern from an economic perspective. We are confident that the vast majority of American tourists will avoid a country whose reputation is associated with Nazism, even if that association is not justified." Even if that association is not justified. Yet perhaps no controversy stands out as starkly as the ADL's pressure campaigns against companies for ideological compliance like Facebook and X and a plethora of others. This is all in an effort to, quote-unquote, combat hate speech. But there's a fine line between combating hate speech and silencing dissenting voices. In 2020, the ADL launched the Stop Hate for Profit campaign. This campaign called on businesses to pause their advertising on Facebook in July of 2020, citing the platform's alleged inaction on hate speech and misinformation, and leading to Facebook losing $60 billion with a B, billion dollars in market value in just 48 hours. The campaign criticized Mark Zuckerberg's decision to not moderate the US President, Donald Trump, after Zuckerberg defended his decision not to limit Trump's posts, the president's posts. The ADL made a similar move in 2022, calling for a full advertiser boycott of X, formerly known as Twitter, after Elon Musk's decision to reinstate Donald Trump. And when Jonathan Greenblatt was pressed about these pressure campaigns and asked directly if this was a shakedown for donations like what happened to Adidas and the Brooklyn Nets, Greenblatt said that's quote-unquote anti-Semitic trope.
There have been folks who've looked at these situations and felt that they were being shaken down.
Look, I think, let me be honest about that, right? I think it is sort of anti-Semitic trope to suggest when Jewish people express a degree of outrage over anti-Semitism, that somehow that's a shakedown because Jews are greedy.
Now even asking questions is anti-Semitic. But again, as the ADL and Jonathan Greenblatt stated to Iceland, doesn't really matter if that's unfounded. In our modern era, the ADL's influence on digital platforms like X and Facebook cannot and should not be ignored. These platforms are today's town squares, and with the ADL's self-proclaimed mission to combat hate speech, a profound debate arises on what that looks like. What is hate speech?
Even though it seems like it's a good idea to ban these ideas or to ban people discussing these things, in fact, it actually turns out to be a terrible idea.
Well, you see, when people say they want to ban hate speech, what they mean is they want to ban the speech that they hate.
Yes.
But if you allowed something called hate speech to be banned, then the only important question would be who decides.
While the U.S. Supreme Court doesn't recognize hate speech as a distinct category outside First Amendment protections, the term is wielded with increasing frequency, and it's often championed by groups like the ADL.
And free speech only matters, it's only relevant when it's someone you don't like saying something you don't like, because obviously speech that you like is, that's easy. The thing about censorship is that, sure, for those who would advocate it, just remember, at some point, that will be turned on you.
With the power to label and smear and boycott and pressure, the ADL sits in a precarious position, to put it lightly. Their actions can shape public perception, influence business and major policy decisions, and most importantly, influence or redefine the boundaries of acceptable discourse.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
As the globe grows ever more interconnected and our debates shift into the digital realm, the responsibilities of entities like the ADL become even more profound. It's a call not just for transparency, but for humility and respect for the principles that underpin our free society.